basically summarizes what we're doing. Okay, so on this sheet you'll see basically an overview of what we talked about, kind of the structure of the meeting, the quantity of folks that attended, just so they can kind of get a framework of what the night was like. And then from there, we took the feedback that the group gave in the small group sessions last time about the items that surprised you, key areas of focus, some pros and cons, and tried to synthesize that a bit and consolidate it and have a summary of the feedback that you provided as part of your observations in Jackson Elementary last week. And so please take a look at that. Certainly if you have feedback tonight, feel free to provide it to that, but that should be kind of a snapshot of that meeting. And then obviously coming out of tonight, we'll be doing this same tool again. So at the next meeting, we'll provide you a new one of these to put into your binder. Okay? So then from there, the last meeting, the group had requested a couple specific pieces of information from us, some follow-up information specific to enrollment, if you remember that. If you flip to tab 10, you're going to find two pieces of information. The first one, while we look at the 11 by 17, kind of the fold-out, okay? The first thing that was asked was, could you be provided with kind of a snapshot of the history of enrollment for each of the facilities in the district? Okay, and so what we've done is worked with the school district here to basically go back from this year, 10 years back. Okay, and what we have is your overall third Friday enrollment, so kind of our documented district enrollment for each building, starting in 08, 09 through this school year. So the numbers you see in the 17-18 school year are our third Friday counts for this school year.
What year did we remove the fourth grades? Was that 14-15 or 15-16 that the fourth grades aren't included, because that would make the number go down?
It does.
Fifth grade be 14-15, correct.
14-15.
Yeah. So you will see a correlation here. So if you take a look at, let's just say at Barton Elementary School, right? If you move ahead there to the 14-15 school year, you see that X in there. That was the year we closed that school. Okay. That was also about the same time that we shifted our grade configuration as well. Okay. And so as you look down, if you were to look then at that same year for Silverbrook Intermediate, you see we almost doubled our student population there. Okay, so that was just where you can see where we pulled that grade out and shifted that into the intermediate school, and obviously did some significant investments in terms of additional renovations. So a couple notes at the bottom. One, just referencing what this information is based on, and then the second thing, really just noting that this is not, I would say, a all-encompassing district enrollment. Okay, it's not the intent here. This doesn't include some of the charter programs, some of the alternative 5 programs, and some special ed pieces. This is really a snapshot looking at each individual building across the board. Okay? But hopefully does give you a bit of context just in terms of the trajectory of each of those existing buildings. Okay? And then with that, the second question that came up was somewhat around capacity of each of the buildings. Okay, and someone had asked a question about, is there a square foot per student analysis that could accompany that enrollment number we just looked at? Okay, and so just as kind of a intro to talking about building capacity, generally there's lots of different ways to talk about building capacity. In essence, we're asking how many kids can we educate in that building? Okay, and there's lots of different ways to look at that. We can just say how many kids can we physically fit in that building by code. Ideally, architecturally for building code, we can fit quite a few. In reality, that's not best practice for how many kids we want to teach in every classroom. Okay, so then we start to look at, okay, what is our ideal student-teacher ratios for each of the classes? And then from there, we can look at utilization. Okay, meaning if you're in the high school, very different from an elementary school. Elementary school kids basically spend their day in one class, right? They may move around to an art class or to lunch, but most of the day is in their homeroom. High school, obviously our students are transient, right? They're moving around. Our classrooms are not utilized all day long. And in an ideal maximized utilization, a high school classroom is used about 80% to 85% of the day. Okay? And so to land on student capacity, it's quite kind of a detailed analysis. Not really, I don't think, the answer to the question as much as just a gut check on where we're at. so that's really what this attempts to do. So this just basically says, what is our gross square footage of our school for each individual school, benchmarked against how many kids we're educating in that building. Okay, so that would just basically say, how many square feet of building do we have for every one student? So you can see we've bolded really the schools that we've been charged as a group to look at. So one is Jackson Elementary, and you can see we're just under 60,000 square feet. We have about 370 kids, which math suggests that's about 160 square feet per student. Then at the high school, same math applies, but there we've blended it. Clearly we know it's two schools, but in analysis we have a lot of shared space and a lot of overlap between the two schools. So we have about 460,000 square feet in this building, a little over 2,200 students, about 204 square feet per student. What does that mean? How does that compare to industry averages? We've provided kind of the industry standard below that. Okay? And really, depending on who you ask, that number can be swayed significantly, right? If a high school, if you think about it, may have a pool, may have an auditorium, may have a field house, may have lots of things that another high school doesn't have, right? That could skew those numbers significantly. Okay? And so really this is just some best practices numbers for you to benchmark against. So in that comparison, elementary schools, we use the Minnesota Planning Guide because they have strong recommendations for schools in the region. And the same for school planning and management, which is kind of an industry publication where they make recommendations. And you can see what we've done is average those two, which suggests an elementary school is about a little over 130 square feet per student. So you can see we have a bit more there at Jackson. I would say, if you think about Jackson though, and you remember walking around that building, you remember it was kind of a series of additions over time. There was a lot of corridors, linking areas, and ramps, and it was a pretty inefficient use of square footage as a whole. Okay, so that I think does account for some of that difference. Okay. And then at the high school, you can see the industry average is just under 200 square feet. So generally, we're about in the right ballpark for that. Okay, total square footage. We still have a lot of kids in the building, no doubt, but we're kind of within that range. So just as a follow-up to the last meeting, does the group feel like that these pieces, you might want to spend some more time studying this, but do you think that that answered the questions that you guys had related to that? Okay, great. Well, as we go forward, things like this, please keep asking. That's really our role here, is to be sure we're supporting you and getting you information and answering questions that you may have. Okay?
I have one thing. So one of the things that people were talking about was the safety. And I went out to Jackson and after, and one of the things that wasn't mentioned, because I talked to Judd Delnick, the police chief, and he said, did they mention that there's police presence at the school both morning and afternoon for the students? He says there's heavy teacher and police presence and adult parent presence to help with safety. He said that there have only been 2 accidents, and he said there was nothing personal injury, it was minor fender bender. And then I did see that they had the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit signs, which is a heavy decrease, and they have the blinking lights there too. So he asked if that was mentioned,
Sure.
and I didn't recall hearing that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think going from recollection, I think last time we talked more about some of the concerns the group had, not as much about some of the things they've done to help manage some of that. So I think that's good feedback. I would ask the district, I don't know, Dave, if maybe you can speak to school resource officers or some of the participation you have with law enforcement.
Jackson I'm not very familiar with, but at the high school there are 2 resource officers here on a kind of a rotating basis.
And that's very common. The majority of school districts do have that, a similar relationship to that, where they do have a presence in the building. Their vehicles usually are parked near entries and things like that. So it's pretty common.
I did attend last week, but do we have figures on how many children at Jackson are walkers versus ride the bus?
It's a fair question. We can, I think Dave, do you think we can find that information?
I know, for example, McLean is I think it's the most walking school.
Sure.
So Jackson, if there are less walkers, there'd be less concern then also with being hit by cars. I'm assuming that's what the issue is.
But the trade-off is then you have more cars. So that's kind of our balance
No,
there.
buses.
More vehicles. Yep. So,
But you have a lot of kids on buses.
Yep. And so I think one of the things I think we're going to do there is bring back a site plan that tries to diagram how drop-off and pick-off works, okay? Because I think that would be helpful for the group to kind of have a visual of how that movement happens, where we park, where we stagger parents and buses and things like that. So we'll put that on our list for the next meeting so we can